Howdy, folks. I want to welcome you to the campfire, a place where we can just sit and tell a story or two, and we can ponder on the unusual and mysterious things that occur out here in the wild. I'll tell you some of my stories, and well, you can tell me some of yours. This is Clay Steele. Come join me around the campfire here beneath the stars. Grab a cup of coffee or a cold drink, and let's talk about our stories. Can't wait. Well, hello again. It's me, and I'm just sitting around another campfire. And darned if I wasn't thinking, I've got another story I'd really like to tell you folks. And it has to do with, I spend a lot of time in the mountains. Some big mountains, some of the little mountains, but I operate on ranches, cattle ranches, hunting ranches, that kind of thing. And so they're often in the mountains, right? So this one has to do with a ranch, a pretty large ranch in the coastal mountains of Central California, in the San Andreas Fault area. And it's a beautiful area if you've ever been there. Man, oh man, it's a different kind of green than the rest of the coastal mountains. And that partially because, it's the whole San Andreas Fault thing is it's ocean bottom that's been squished and slid and forced up from the thousands of feet below ground. And so now you've got this nice ocean bottom soil full of fossils, and it's a whole bunch of different nutrients. It's kind of different than just the standard topsoil that you got around it. There was a time, it was about 10, 15 years ago, and I was flying over the mountains. I was coming from Arizona back to, I think San Francisco is where we landed, and then I'd get on another plane and head back to the home ranch. But as we were flying, I had just spent about 3 weeks on that ranch, on that particular ranch, and I had cleared a mountaintop of brush. The owner was thinking he was going to land his little airplane there at some point. It didn't work out, but that's what I had done, one of the jobs that I had done that trip. And so it was bare dirt for, about 500, 600 feet at least on the very top, and then it ran down toward one canyon another 1,000 feet or so. So it was a pretty long stripe, and it was about 200 feet wide. And darned if I couldn't see it from that airplane at 30,000 feet, because I could kind of picked up where I was, and then I started looking. I'm sitting on a window seat, and I'm going, well, gosh, yeah, I know where that intersection is, and I could see that mountain, and I could see that creek bed, and then I saw this light tan stripe, and that was that mountaintop that I'd cleared. And all around that, that whole north-south mountain range of the San Andreas Fault, that whole stripe, just a different, darker color of green. Well, it's important now for me to go back in time just about 2 weeks from that time before I started that job on that mountain and tell you about how this story starts. Now, there's a neighboring rancher, and they're cattlemen, and his father were out riding their horses on their range. It's springtime, and they're out looking at stuff and, trying to see what the springs look like, and the roads and the trees and just all the things you do, riding the land that you can't really get around on during the middle of the summer when it's dry and hot. You don't want to get out there when it's 100 degrees. So they're out there riding at springtime. Now the son is 50 years old, and the father is probably 75 years old. He's an older man, but still a good horseback rider and a cattle rancher. And so they had split up, and they were riding. They could see each other, but they were riding 300, 400 yards apart, with the rancher down in the bottom of this little valley and his son up on this ridge line, and they're walking the same direction. And down in this valley, this son, we'll call him the son, looks down there and sees what looks like a big old stump, big old dark colored stump, and his father's riding up to it, and he says, man, there ain't no stumps down there. And so he says, was really paying attention. He's watching his father, and he says to himself, I wonder what the hell that is. And as he stops his horse, now he's watching, and his father rides up to that stump about 15 feet away and stops. And he's looking down there, and that stump's moving around a little, and he says, son of a bitch, I guess it's a person. And on the other hill, across that little valley, across that little meadow, across the little valley. On the other hill in the brush, he sees some movement, and he gets his binoculars out, and he gets to looking, and there's a couple of men up there. Man, this is strange. And they're not wearing camouflage and orange hats and all that like a hunter would do, or even poachers, believe it or not, often wear the orange and the camouflage. But he says, what the hell's going on here? So he gets his horse and he heads down to his father as fast as he can and rides down there and gets close to him, and he sees that his father's talking to this small man with a dark coat on, like a big raincoat, and he's got a rifle. It's underneath the coat, but you can see it. He's holding that rifle pointed barrel down. And he says, Dad, let's get the hell out of here. He doesn't want to explain that there's guys on the other hill. He doesn't want to have to go through all that. He just wants to get the heck away. So they ride out of there, and once they get, just a distance away where he feels somewhat safe, he says, Dad, what the hell's going on? He says, I wasn't getting anything back from that feller. He says, it was just a strange little guy. He says, I don't know what's going on. I think they're poaching, or I think he was poaching. And he says, Dad, there's others on that hill over there. There's 2 or 3 others at least. So they head as fast as they can for the horse trailer. They decide that's the best thing they can do. It's hard to fight an enemy if you don't know who and where they are. So they head for the truck, load their horses up, get back in phone range, and call the sheriff. And they try to explain their story, but anyway, the sheriff's sending somebody out. Now, this is a ways out in the mountains, but they meet him at the road, at the paved road. They meet the sheriff's deputy, and they try to explain everything, and they head back out that way as close as they can get, and you kind of glass the area, but deputy can't see anything. He's on a dirt road, and he can't see anything from where he's at. So they all head back, and the dad and the son are pretty freaked out. So they start calling around, and they end up calling Fish and Game, and they call the sheriff and talk to somebody in the office, and they talk to BLM people, and they just get it all going, and they stir up the whole hornet's nest. And so the sheriff's department calls a meeting of local ranchers and landowners, and that's how I heard about it at the first time. And they called the owner of the ranch I was working on, because they were neighboring ranchers. And we didn't go to the meeting because I live quite a ways away from that area. And by the time the meeting was held, it was too close for people to get up and change everything and get over there. So we got our report from the father and son who went to the meeting, and what they were told and it was the BLM doing most of the talking. Fish and Game gave their little report. The sheriff stood by, and BLM did most of the talking, the federal agency. And they were told to stand down if they ever see anything like this again, and report it to the sheriff. Do not approach or harass these men. They called them men. He said, and you will be compensated if you can document a cattle kill, or damage to your property, like vehicle through a fence or some other type of damage, I guess, to your cattle ranch. So nobody was really satisfied by that, and there was no real explanation. But that sure got around, and most all of us knew what kind of was going on, that you were kind of on our own, which you're kind of used to out there because you're so far away from help if you need any, and your phones don't work anyway. So going into that next job, well, that meeting had already happened, so I already knew that, and it was only a couple of weeks before, so I was taking every precaution, I thought, against an unknown enemy, right? So I strapped a 30-30 on the hood of my bulldozer, my D8, in a leather scabbard, just strapped it over the top of the hood so I could get up out of the seat and reach forward and grab it, and I'd have it. And I'd keep an eye on it the whole time so it wouldn't get away from me. And my idea is, I could protect myself if something was to happen and I was to be attacked, at least I could defend myself. That's how naive we are most of the time. Well, we worked for a couple weeks, and and didn't see much of anything. We were all on edge. We were all packing heat, and we were all looking behind us and, glassing more than we normally glass, really trying to figure out, there was no evidence of anything. And the neighboring rancher and his father, they never saw anything else. Well, it was, I guess we were about, like I say, about 2 weeks into this job, and I'd cleared the top of that mountain, and I was working the roads back around that had already been built. And what you do every year is you just kind of go over them with the cat and clean them and knock the dead trees off of them and any washes that occur, and you do all that, knock the grasses off of the road so they're not a fire hazard. So I was doing that, and so I was headed out to one far edge of the ranch, way up in the top of these mountains. And so I'm working by myself, and the idea is you go out to the end, turn around, and then head back. And when you get back to the home ranch, you're home. And if you didn't make it back, they'd know which direction you went, and so they'd come and find you and help you out if you was in trouble. So I head on out that way, and I pass through this flat mountaintop area. It's a little dirtier than the rocky mountain roads coming out of the canyon. And so I'd go across across this mountaintop to the other side of this flat. It's about 1.5 miles. Turn around and come back, and then down the canyon, up a canyon, and then back down to the home ranch. And I'd been done for the whole trip probably. I head on out, and this is pretty far out on the edge of the ranch, so I'm kind of feeling the most vulnerable. And I really got eyes all around me, plus watching what I'm doing. And so I'm really paying attention to the road and what you do if you're a person that works outdoors, a hunter or a rancher or anybody that spends any time outdoors. If there's something on the roads, you can see the tracks. Once your eyes get used to looking for things like that, you can really read the roads. So that's what I'm doing. I'm looking at the roads. I get out to the end, and I turn around. I take a few minutes break, and I kind of look things over and glass a little bit. Don't see anything that looks strange. Head back down, and as I cross over that flat part of that dirty top of that little mountain, as I start down into that canyon right there, damned if there aren't tracks in the road. So I stopped the cat, and I grabbed that 30-30, and I jumped off the cat, and I walked down. It was in front of me, about 30 feet, and I walked down there, and I get to looking, and somebody, they were man's tracks, had crossed the road within the last hour and a half since I had drove out. They walked across the road, and as I was driving back in, there I saw them. Now, the weird thing is they were barefooted, up in those brushy mountains with oaks and poison oak and chamise and all the things that are up there, man. You don't want to walk barefooted. Your feet would hurt like heck. But nonetheless, they were barefooted. They were wide and short tracks. And I'm not an expert on tracks, not human tracks anyway, but that was an oddball looking track. And close together. They weren't running or sprinting, you can tell, and after reading tracks for a few years, you can kind of see that. Just walked right across the road, and then, of course, the tracks disappear on the edge of the road because there's grasses and leaves, and everything just goes away. So that was pretty weird. Didn't know what to think about it. Got back on the cat, got my binoculars out, and looked all around, and thought, you know what? Hair's standing up on the back of my neck. I'm heading out of here. So I took the cat, and I just finished on in and got back in, and another hour and a half or so I made it back and told the guys right away. And so that just kind of had us all on edge, and we talked about it and we thought about it. And I think it was the following week, 3 or 4 guys went up there, and they were usually the hunters in that area, but they went up there to kind of just get the campsite ready for hunting season at the end of the summer. And they made quite an effort. They took their Jeeps, and they're all armed to the teeth, and they went all around that ranch, and they didn't see any more. They didn't see the ones that I had seen either, but they didn't see any tracks anywhere. And they looked and they looked and they looked. So it's another one of those things that you can't confirm anything, even though you know you saw it. And you were there, so you know you believe yourself. And I know that those men believe me. I'm not one to make up things. But what exactly was it that created those tracks? I mean, it wasn't a normal human. And it wasn't a man, like a poacher's still going to wear boots. That was just bizarre. It's one of those things you can't explain. And that's the thing that most of us in the outdoors have, is these stories. And I want you to unlock them. I want you to look back in the corners of your mind and find those little memories, those stories that you probably just put away, figuring you'd never have to think about it again. I want you to think about them. And I want you to tell me about them. Let's get it out in the open and see how many of us have done or seen the same thing. Maybe we can even figure it out. Anyway, enjoy your campfire. And it's special to be outdoors. I just want you all to know that. I'll talk to you again soon, huh?